Hi again, this is the second in a 3 or 4 part series for project M2A1, the Riverfront Park using SketchUp. So this is where we left off the last time. We had just imported the image, traced over the lines, and everything is a separate surface. There's no overlaps, no thick lines on the interior of this. Everything's set up. The next step I want to walk you through is how to start creating landforms. Again, this is a quick sketch plan, have an idea of the landforms of the existing forms, and then we can add new ones in there. The first step in doing that is to create some groups. Not everything has to be grouped, but we are doing this to isolate geometry, and as I go through it, you'll see. The first thing I want to do is double click here, make that a group, make that a group, outside, again, double click, right click, group. Want to make that a group, and this a group. Now this, it doesn't, I can make it a group, but it's not really necessary. What I'm trying to do is isolate the river and isolate this interior area because we're going to operate on that a little differently. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 groups. That allows us to operate on each of those individual. And the first thing we're going to do is start with a little plug-in tool called the Scale Radial Bending. Since I started on the right side in class, I'll do that, but I'm going to do this side and this side. Well, I'll do that first, then I'm going to come back and work on the river. In class, we're going to drop that down and recreate the embankments. And once we do that, then we can come back and use the soap skin and bubble to reproduce a mesh that we can edit with Artisan. Okay, so let's start with this one. Let's just get them into shape. Now, we could use the soap skin on this first and then bend it, but that creates much more complex geometry, and so this just means it's going to work better, faster, simpler without that. I select the group. I select the Scale Radial Bending tool. And before I do anything else, I want to tap on the tab key and I want to change the settings in these parameters. A bunch of things, soft, smooth, additional edges hidden, keep it collinear. You don't really have to change anything except the first one to 10. Then click OK. That just means it gives us more segments that it bends around, so it's a little finer. Then I don't want to overlap this edge here, so I'm going to come a little bit in, click and hold the button down and move till I get the green plane selected. Then I'm going to click on the endpoint as a reference, and I click again, and I just bend up, and you can see the preview happening there. I'm going to bend it up kind of steep because I'm going to take the top part and then bend it over again. So now that I have that done again, and move it over so I have a little space. Maybe about from here, get the green, snap to the end, click, and bend that around so it looks like it's kind of leveling out at the top, okay? Something like that. Later on, I want to smooth this. I'm going to create a mesh, so for right now, I'm going to double click. If you see a line show up, then just triple click on the surface, right click, choose Soften Smooth Edges, and under here, down here, I'll go Soften Coplanar and move this over to, I don't know, 48, 50 degrees. So now when I get out of here, that's nice and smooth, and that will work well for using the soap skin. Let's go through that same process on the other side. I've got a group. It's a little bigger, but same process. Once I've set that 10 unit, I don't really have to do it again, so I'm going to come down here, maybe a little farther. Get the green, click, click again, and bend it up. Come over here. The green, click, click a second time, and bend it back down. And I have basically the same issue here. Get a line in there, triple click, right click, soften smooth, done. So I'm just creating this kind of river valley shape initially, and then I'm going to add a lot more form to that. So those are the only two I need to use that radial bend on. You can use that for actually all kinds of things. I didn't show that in class, but while I have it, I'll show you another little experiment, little side track here. If you take a shape like this and you pull it up, You don't really have to make groups of these things. I can come in, select that, choose that tool, click here, here, click again, and I can bend that around. The nice thing about that is, once I'm done with that, I can use the push-pull tool, and if I hold the control key down, it actually makes a copy of the surface, so it pulls that out. I can select that, use the radial bend. This time I'm going to bend it the other way, so I'm going to get the, there we go, the blue, snap it there, click again, I can bend it around the corner. So you can create all kinds of interesting shapes. Come back here, use the push-pull tool, control key, pull that out, select that, right select it, radial bend. Let's see. Radial bend. Come on. There we go. Red. Go to the endpoint. Click. Click. You can twist it and turn it any direction you want. So it has a lot of applications to actually build interesting forms that would be kind of difficult to model in SketchUp otherwise, just through a series of transformations. But since we've got this set up the way we want, we're going to stop there for now. Let's go on to the river and set that up. Now, if you remember when we did this in class, I want to pull this down to create a lower river water level and then have embankments along the sides. If I double click on that, select the move tool, click, tap the Alt key and move that down, you remember it creates those embankments, but it really is very distorted. SketchUp doesn't do a very good job of auto folding this. It makes it connect, but it doesn't look very good. A much better approach is to actually delete this side, this surface, and this surface. So now I just have that. With that selected only, I'll use the Move tool, tap the Alt, I'll pull it down 4 feet, and deselect it. Okay, now I've got the problem of these areas I have to fill in, right? I don't have any slopes along the bank of the river there. That's where we use the soap skin and bubble tool. So I'm going to, excuse me, tilt it up in the surface, drag around, select it, hold Shift and Control to subtract from the selection, and just right click over that and make sure that the only thing selected is that area. This is also why that initial geometry is super important. If this is well-formed, simple geometry, connected at all the endpoints, this will work every time. If it's badly formed, if it's disconnected, then it's not going to work. You have to have a certain amount of digital craft while you're doing this and really be careful with how you put things together. Digital tools are really amazing, but they're not very forgiving. So now that I have that selected, I'm going to click on my Generate Soap Skin, and it will give me a preview that's fairly coarse. I'm going to step this up to 30, enter. When I hit 30 and enter, that's just a preview. It's not starting it. If I hit enter again, now it's going to start. Now I can zoom in and rotate and look at this, but don't click on anything else while this is running. It's doing a lot of calculations, and if you interrupt it, you end up with a half-done job. So just let it go. It's going to keep bending and twisting that until it matches all those edges, and you'll be able to tell when it finishes. Because it will get nice and smooth just like that. Now this tool doesn't cancel itself out, so in order to start again, you need to click on the Select tool. And if we want to smooth that, like we did, let's open that up, triple click, right click, smooth, soften edges, and we're good to go there. Okay, let's do the other one. We're going to come around here. This is another reason to have grouped those other things, because if I select the group, I can get rid of that, Shift Control. Just going to get rid of all the things I don't want in my selection. For some reason, some of these don't deselect. So if I have to, you have to click on them individually. There we go. Like that. Not sure why that's not working. I don't want this one either. I don't want these. It's interesting that So that marquee drag select method doesn't really work there. But anyway, it doesn't take too long to deselect them. I want the same surfaces selected, both edges, and the lines that connect them. Go back to soap skin. Okay, so clearly I didn't get everything, and it happens. So let's go through, and I'm going to do this, Shift, Control, Select, Control, Select. I might have deselected something, so that looks, oh. All right, let's try it again. All right. Well, this does happen. I will just keep going because I'm going to figure out why this isn't connected. Oh, that's why it's not connected. Usually when you make groups out of these things, it maintains the original line through here. This may be a case where it's not. So for this, I am going to simply explode that group. Now I have all these edges. I can always reform that. I think that might be what's causing the problem. So select that. Select that. Let's hope it is. Or I'll have to start over. Okay, that looks pretty good. I don't seem to have anything else selected. There we go. That's what did it. So I just ungrouped this. I exploded it. I'm going to type in my 30, hit enter. I like the preview. Hit enter again and let it go. So if you have that issue with that, it may be because for some reason when I created this group, it was not allowing the rest of these lines all the way through. Did the same thing on the right side, it worked fine. Whatever reason, ungrouped that or exploded it, then it had that edge back, which is what I needed for this plugin to work. It just has to have that closed loop. All right, so there we go. My select tool, open the group up, triple click, soften smooth, back out of there, and we're ready to go. Okay, that's really the steps I went through this morning in order to create these basic forms. And the next step that we want to use is to use the Artisan plugin to start freeforming the landforms in these other areas. Here, here, here. We can modify this as well. The river's basically done the way it is. And maybe here. Let's run through that process. I'll start over here and we'll work our way across. First thing, I want to double click on this and open up the group. And I don't want to triple click on this. I just want to double click. If I triple click, it gives me all these other hidden lines. I just want to double click to get the surface and the edges. Before I can use the Artisan tool, in this case, I need to have that soap skin. It needs a mesh in order to operate it. It's basically using those kind of 3D meshes, square meshes, in order to manipulate the landform surface. So I'm going to just double click on that, choose that. In this case, I'm going to go up to 40, hit enter once to preview, hit enter a second time to activate the plugin. And remember, when it does this, in this case, I actually have another surface there. When I did the river banks, there was no surface, right? I deleted it. So I didn't have to do anything else when it was done. In this case, I already have a surface there. And what this just did, it made a new group. So usually what I do is I cut that, select this by clicking once. I don't want the edges. And then I can do paste in place. And since this is already isolated in a group, I can explode that too. So now I just have one group, I open it up, and I'm ready to go. Let's smooth it off too before we use Artisan. So I'm triple click, right click, soften smooth edges. Since I've already adjusted the settings, I don't really have to do anything else to it. So let's go over and do the other one, and then I'll come back and we'll work through the Artisan. I'm gonna come in here, open it up, double click only, soap skin, 40, enter to preview, enter to proceed. It's running through, creates the mesh on an angle. Then once it figures out the basic planar mesh, it goes through and connects all the outside edges and warps it to fit. There it goes. You can use this soap skin on any shape. The neat thing about it is once you apply this to a surface, once it's done, then you can manipulate it using the artisan plugins and shape it and freeform it and turn it into a real organic form. So all this takes a little time to process through, a little longer on this one, right? It's got more meshes, got a lot more curves, a lot more edges to match. On the computers at school, might take a little longer. Got a pretty fast one at home. So it's running through it pretty quickly, but just be patient, it will finish. And like I said before, don't click on anything, just let it go. You want to move it around so you can see it, fine, but let it go. All right, still kind of blending that in, and now I think we're done. I'm going to cut this, click on that surface, delete it, paste back in place, so it's just one surface there. And since I'm already inside a group, you can see the boundaries here. I'm going to explode this. I don't need a group inside a group. It's already isolated. Open it up, triple click, right click, soften smooth. There we go. So I've already started to get these nice landform shapes. While we're at it, let's do the other two. We have a group here and a group here and a group here, right? Oh, well, we ungrouped this. So let's double click and regroup that. Let's go in there, double click, soap skin, 40. Well, when you see these kind of overlapping surfaces in there, that's just because there is a planar surface in there. And since this mesh is also going to be planar, it's going to create that weird display issue because you have two surfaces that are basically occupying the same 3D space. But we don't care because once it's done, we'll cut this, delete the surface, paste in place. Okay, it looks like it's finished. Select, cut, click once, delete, paste in place, explode. There we go. All right, now double click, triple click, smooth soften edges. We've got soften coplanar, so even though this is a planar surface, it gets rid of those extra lines that we see in there. So we're gradually replacing everything. Double click, soap skin, 40. Now in this case, since it's smaller, it's kind of a subdivision of the space. Probably can do 20. Looks about the same proportion, right? And enter again. Use your visual judgment. You don't need this grid any finer than necessary because it will, once we smooth it, the landforms will be smooth. And I'm not going to go into it here, but part of the artisan tools allow you to subdivide an area and actually create a finer grid within a larger grid. So where you need detail, it's called mesh subdivision. It's actually one of the methods that's more popular now than even polygons or NURBS modeling because you only add the detail where you need it, and where you don't need it, you allow it to be simple. All right, select, cut, click, delete, paste in place, then explode. Open it up, triple click, soften smooth edges. That one's ready to go. All right, we got one more to do for right now, and then I'll move on to the artisan. So double click, soap skin, 20, looks right, enter again. Once you get the hang of this, it really is a pretty quick procedure. You can go through and create a really quite nice landform model of any kind of sketch design in a very short amount of time. All right, looks like it's done. Select that. It always creates a group. Cut it. Click once. Delete. Paste in place. Explode. Right click. Soften smooth edges. There we go. So we've got all those what were just simple planar surfaces, even though you can't see those. If we turn on our hidden geometry, you can see now we've got meshes all over the place that allows us to do all kinds of editing. And honestly, when I start using Artisan, I tend to turn the hidden geometry on so I can see it, because you actually can see the deformations a little bit better when you work on it. So let's start with this one. Just going to open that up. Now this is really, two things are key before you start using the Artisan tools, which are this set of tools right here. The first thing that's key is that you go into Tools, Artisan, Settings, and turn Auto Smooth Sculpt to on. Now if you lose your profile or you clear it out, if you need to do that, it'll change this setting back, because by default, I don't know why, by default it's off. But you want to make sure that Auto Smooth Sculpt is on. Soft fall off mode is on smooth instead of linear. I think that's the default setting. So once that's set to on, click OK. The next thing you need to do before you start sculpting, if I just grab this tool and start manipulating the mesh, what you can see is when I do that, it's actually moving the edge. So if I sculpt it here, now it's not connected to the edge of the river anymore. That's a no-no. We don't want to distort that. So I will undo that. In order to keep that from happening, I just I have to triple click on this. I think this will work this way. Go to Tools, Artisan, and Crease Selection. Now that's just their term for deciding what parts of this geometry you want to lock down. In this case, it's the boundary vertices. Okay, so we've got 247 vertices crease, which is what we want. Now we're ready to use the tool. So now if I go back and choose this tool, and if I right click, you can see it's set on Sculpt. Remember, the up and down arrows determine how strong the effect is. The smaller this arrow is, the more subtle the landform change. If I make this really big, it's going to make it more extreme. So generally, I keep it down pretty low, because usually we're not, you're not trying to create real extreme landform. It's much better to kind of slowly sculpt it. Now if I come over the edge, you can see it didn't unlock that. It kept that edge. Now I don't really like that because it's a real steep slope, so I wouldn't get that close to it, but you can see it will maintain the edge now because I creased it. So I'm going to undo that. The right and left arrow keys make this bigger or smaller. If you want more detail, then you get smaller. If you want bigger area, you get bigger. I would say, keep it down. Maybe that's too small, something like that. And then as you click and drag, it raises that. And you'll notice when you let go, it does some auto smoothing already. So if you want to create a little more of a mound there, you can do that. Again, it's a great visual way to create and adjust landforms, just like you were modeling it with clay and sculpting it, which you've all done before. Okay, so let's just go through how you do this. Totally up to you. Once you've got it kind of set, if you want to smooth it out a little bit, you can right click and choose smooth. And again, the effect is controlled and it just goes in and blends that. You can see it with the hidden geometry on. You can see how it kind of softens that a little bit, spreads things out. Really does a nice job of sculpting organic forms, and in this case, landform. Best grading tool ever. Okay, so that looks pretty good. So that one, if I turn my hidden geometry back off, you can see now instead of just having slope there, we've got some undulations. It looks a lot more natural, like a landform that has those variations in it. We can do the same thing in here. Open this up, double click, Tools, Artisan, Crease Selection, Bounding Vertices. Okay, great. 839 vertices. I'll turn the hidden geometry on so you can see it. Now if we pick our tool right there, now in this case I'm going to shrink this down, right? I'm also going to go back to the Sculpt tool. Sometimes I will tell you that occasionally the arrows kind of get mixed up, and down is up and up is down, but you can, if you see it going down when it shouldn't, then just adjust it the other way. So I'm going to create kind of a mound in here, and then another one that comes through here, that moves up. There's no right or wrong for this. This is your chance to sculpt landform however you see fit. Don't want to get too solid. I mean, maybe you want to create a little separation between this path and this path. Once you get the basics, you can go to smooth. So here it doesn't look like it's doing anything. So I'm going to go down the other way. And now you can see it smoothing it. So sometimes the arrow direction gets a little messed up. I'm not sure why, but just reverse it if that's the case. Really nicely blend that, create nice smooth landforms that and shorter that line, the more subtle the effect. And basically that's what we're trying to go for. Nice subtle changes and adjustments, not major ones at one time. Okay, so I'll turn my hidden geometry back off. Again, starting to look pretty nice, right? We've got that nice undulating landform, which was just a flat surface. And now with just a little sculpting with the artisan tool, we can turn that into any landform we want. And what I'd like you to do is to go through and do that with this landform, this landform, this one, and this one. So if we want to come in here along the river, triple click on that, tools, artisan, crease selection, boundary vertices. Okay, perfect. Now we're going to turn on the hidden geometry, and we're going to pick our tool, switch back to sculpt. Got a little seating area here, so I'm going to kind of surround that a little bit. And maybe that's too much. I don't know. Keep the view of the river open there. So have this come up here, so we kind of have this reveal the view in certain places and then hide it in others, so it doesn't all look the same. I'm going to make this a little smaller, just do a little raise in there. It doesn't have to be a lot. You don't have to create mountains and change all this in here. We're just trying to create a little idea of how you would make this a little more interesting. Now it still kind of has some peaks and valleys. I'm going to switch to the smooth tool. Just smooth that off, just make it a little more subtle, a little softer. So you're working like a sculptor here, just gently blending that and smoothing that off. So this is a little stronger here. I want to blend that down. So now instead of just having this little seating area or paving space kind of out by itself, creating this nice soft landform. And it has a little sense of enclosure. You know, we're using landform to create that subtle feeling of space there. And you can keep going back and forth, you know. If you smooth it out too much, go back and raise it back up. And turn our hidden geometry back off. There we go, nice landforms being sculpted. And the last one here, go through it one more, double click. Tools, artisan, crease selection, bounding vertices. Okay, ready to go. You want to see the hidden geometry, go to View, Hidden Geometry. Make sure you have the Sculpt tool. Make it a little bit bigger. You can always start with some, you know, kind of major, larger size landform adjustments. Want to make sure our ketchup barbecue stains running downhill there. And then you can shorten this up a bit, reduce this, come in and make some more subtle changes here. And then I'm going to switch to my smooth tool. There we go. And just blend that down a little bit more. Get rid of some of those strong peaks and edges. You can see sometimes it pulls up, sometimes it pushes down. It's just basically trying to blend the difference between the, depends on where you start clicking. Let's soften that down a little bit, create a little softer transition slope there. And because I've creased the edges, it's never going to affect that bottom area. Okay, Let's turn the hidden geometry back off, and there you go. Now we can do, I guess, the only place I have left. So that one's a little taller, but it really starts creating a framing, and as you put plants and trees and things on there, it's going to make a difference. We can do this one here, our last area. Double click, Tools, Artisan, Crease Selection, Bounding Vertices. All right, done. And now this one, I'm definitely going to get a little smaller, switch to Sculpt. And this one I kind of created a little bit of a higher point there, and left it a little lower in between, so you can kind of see through there. So this time I'm doing it without the hidden geometry showing, so you can see what's happening, but sometimes actually seeing those lines allows you to see the subtle movement that's going on. It's difficult to see there, but that looks pretty good. Nice smooth landforms. Okay. And that gives you an eye. You get down to more eye level, you can see what that's looking like. All right, so it creates a much more interesting experience walking through here than having just flat landform all the way. All that's done without contours, without knowing exactly what the landforms have to be, just using your visual judgment to make that happen. And it should be, if I can pick this up. Let's see. No, it's not happening. I mentioned this morning that that's a projected texture, but it's simply not working the way it should. Should be able to pick that up and apply that right to this surface. See if I can do it from inside. If not, I'm going to have to work on this. So edit group. There we go. Just have to be inside the group to do it, I guess. Now we've got our stain running downhill that way. Looks a little bit better. Edit group. Edit group. Click. Close group. Edit group. Click. Close group. Okay, so there you go. Same image that we had, now with the terrain kind of modeled based on the contours. And everything's set to go to the next section, which I will show you in the next video, how to take this central area, which is still level, and remember we said it's supposed to be a retaining wall that's 1 foot 6 inches high. Show you how to drop that down and then actually create the retaining walls just from the lines that we already have in the drawing. Really quick method, and once you're through that step, then you're basically done with all the modeling, and the next step is to add components for trees and materials for ground cover and so forth.